In the 1970s, in the suburbs of California, there was this feeling, this unspoken promise that you were safe. Behind your locked door, with your family sleeping down the hall, the world outside couldn't touch you. You were home. You were safe. The nights had a certain kind of quiet. You know, the kind where the loudest sound was the hum of your own refrigerator. Crime? That was something that happened somewhere else, to other people. It wasn't supposed to happen here. But that was the illusion, because a shadow was moving through those quiet streets. A predator was learning that the one place you felt the most secure was actually the perfect hunting ground. It started small, or what looked small at the time, in a little farming town called Visalia. They called him the Visalia Ransacker, and he hit over 100 homes. This was just him warming up. His signature was strange, unsettling. He wasn't just there for valuables. He'd tear a place apart with this weird, methodical precision. He took things that had no real monetary value, a single earring, a photograph, small personal things. He was a stalker, a prowler. And it's here, in Visalia, that he committed his first known murder. And then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he stopped. The Visalia Ransacker was gone. The shadow had moved north, and in the suburbs of Sacramento, something far, far worse was about to begin. It's the middle of the night. A woman wakes up, not because of a sound, but because of a light, a single beam of a flashlight blinding her in her own bed. This was the first attack of the man they would come to call the East Area Rapist. His reign of terror had begun. He had a ritual, a terrifying script that he followed almost every time. First, he'd stalk the neighborhoods, picking single-story homes, usually near a creek or a bike path, an easy way out. He'd pry open a window, slip inside, and wake his victims with that flashlight. He'd bind them, usually with shoelaces, and he'd whisper, through clenched teeth, threats. For couples, he had a special kind of psychological torture. He'd take the man, tie him up, and then he would go into the kitchen. He would get plates, and he would stack them on the man's back. And then he'd whisper, "If I hear those plates move, I'm going to kill your wife and then kill you." The violation, it went so much deeper than the physical assault. He would stay for hours. He'd just be there, in their homes, eating their food, going through their things, muttering to himself. He left people so traumatized, their sense of home, of safety, it was just gone, forever. And even when he was gone, he wasn't. He'd call them, sometimes weeks, sometimes years later, just to whisper obscenities down the line. He even called the police, taunting them. One time he called the Sacramento PD and said, "You're never gonna catch me, you dumb. I'm gonna hit again tonight." And a few hours later, he did. Between 76 and 78, the attacks just kept coming. It was a relentless wave of terror, spreading from Sacramento to Stockton to Modesto, all the way to the Bay Area. A full-blown panic set in. People were buying guns, installing deadbolts. Every little noise at night made you jump. A boogeyman was real, and he was out there, hunting. Then came February 2nd, 1978. A young couple, Brian and Katie Majeroy, were out walking their dog. They ran into him. They tried to run. He chased them down. He shot Brian first. Then he executed Katie with a single shot to the head. This was a new line. The East Area Rapist was now a murderer. The attacks in Northern California stopped. And then they started again down south. Orange County, Ventura, Santa Barbara. But now the attacks were different. They were consistently lethal. He wasn't just the East Area Rapist anymore. The press, terrified, gave him a new name, the original Night Stalker. The way he got in, the bindings, the terror, it was all the same, but the ending was different. Now, he left no witnesses. Victims were bludgeoned to death, shot. The violence was just unrestrained. He was getting smarter, more brutal. Dr. Robert Offerman,
and Deborah Manning, Lyman and Charlene Smith, Keith and Patrice Harrington, Manuela Withone, Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez. The list of his victims grew, and because he moved between so many different counties, police departments didn't connect the dots. To them, he was a ghost, a phantom killer striking at random.
His last known victim was an 18-year-old girl named Janelle Cruz. She was home alone in Irvine. He broke in, and he bludgeoned her to death. It was the brutal final act in a decade-long reign of terror.
And then, nothing. He just stopped. For 30 years, the trail was ice cold. The Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker. He just vanished, leaving behind dozens of cold cases and a whole state haunted by what he'd done. But a few people just refused to let it go. One was Paul Holes, a cold case investigator who became absolutely obsessed with the files. The other was a writer, Michelle McNamara. She started digging into the case, determined to piece it all together and give the victims a voice. McNamara saw the problem. All the different names, East Area Rapist, original Night Stalker, it made his crime spree seem disconnected. So she gave him one name, a new name that captured the terrifying scope of his crimes across the entire state, the Golden State Killer. And that name, that focus, brought national attention back to the hunt. The first real break came in 2001. With new DNA technology, investigators could finally prove what they'd suspected for years. The East Area Rapist from Northern California and the original Night Stalker from Southern California, they were the same man, one single monster.
So in 2016, the FBI went all in. A national campaign, a $50,000 reward, a final push. They had his DNA profile. They ran it through CODIS, the National Criminal Database, and nothing. No matches. He was still a ghost, a man with no name, no record, no face. Paul Holes was at a dead end. But then he heard about this brand new revolutionary technique. Something that sounded like it was straight out of science fiction. The idea was to use public genealogy websites to hunt for the killer's family, and through them, maybe, just maybe, they could find him. So that's what they did. They took the killer's DNA from an old crime scene and uploaded it to a public site called GED Match. It didn't point to him, but it pointed to his relatives, his distant cousins. A genealogist named Barbara Ray Venter took that data and started building these enormous family trees, going all the way back to the 1800s, and then they worked forward. It was painstaking work, eliminating hundreds and hundreds of names, until they were left with just one man who fit the profile. The right age, the right location, the right everything. After 4 decades, they finally had a name. Joseph James DeAngelo. A 72-year-old man living a quiet life in a Sacramento suburb, a grandfather, and a former police officer. He had worn a badge during the exact same years he began his crime spree. The man meant to protect people was the monster hunting them in the dark. They just needed one last piece to be sure. They put DeAngelo under surveillance. They watched him and they waited. Finally, they got his DNA off a tissue he'd thrown away. They rushed it to the lab, and the results came back, a perfect match. On April 24th, 2018, the ghost was finally caught. DeAngelo eventually pleaded guilty to 13 murders and admitted to dozens more crimes they could no longer charge him with. But in the end, the story isn't about him. It's about the people he terrorized, who faced him in court with incredible strength. As one of them said, through a representative, "The monster has been unmasked and is no longer of any consequence. I am leaving him behind. The nightmare has ended."